Since finishing Sex Education, which was a huge hit for Netflix, I felt like I started in my early career. I did a lot of drama, some kids films. I did some kind of action and adventure and science fiction, and then I really wanted to do comedy because I hadn't done that before. And then I did comedy films and I did sex ed, and now I feel like I've done that, and I really want to step into roles which people don't expect to see me in. I read that script probably two and a half years ago now, and if you see the movie, you'll know what I mean. It's a real departure from anything I've got to sink my teeth into, and for any audiences to see me in. And so those are things which excite me now. I had so much fun, kind of unleashing parts of myself which I either didn't know I had or hadn't really kind of tapped into. And that was really, it's a challenge, but quite an exciting challenge. Probably the biggest challenge for me is, how do you get an audience to feel for and empathize with someone who, as you said, on the surface is not very likable. He's pretty abrasive and he's rude and he's makes people uncomfortable. But watching the film, you see the circumstance he comes from, and you see how hard he's trying to make ends meet. And it inevitably just blows up in his face. And more than anything, he's looking for connection, and he's lonely. And that's something I think we can all sort of humanize in people. And it's just a really sad state of affairs. And I think the film really shines a light on those communities and those people who perhaps haven't really been represented in film, or if they have, then it's become a caricature. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to humanize these characters. Then it's not less about who's right and who's wrong. It's more of an observation of the sort of slope, the slippery slope that a lot of young men find themselves in, especially in the US, but around the world, and where that can lead, and the pretty disastrous places that can lead. These characters are from two very different backgrounds and have two very different life experiences, but their shared isolation and shared kind of longing for a place to belong, or a community, or a friend, is what brings them together. They're two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. The ease at which people can perform and be someone they're not online has kind of made the people who are lonely even more lonely, and they have access to these communities of similar people that it's this kind of feedback loop of frustration and anger and lack of representation. Some people have said that it's a controversial topic, but it is happening every day, sort of around the world. Yes, it's very specific to America, but this is a daily thing. And I think that doesn't make it controversial, that just makes it real. We're creating a space where this is normalized rather than doing something about it. We're sort of trying to, how do we deal with it after it happens, when really we need to be looking at the cause of the issue. Is why is it happening in the first place? Solomon's problems and goals are very real and very present and consuming and oppressive. Balthazar kind of floats through life, and it means even when he comes to Texas to confront, befriend, whatever it is with Solomon, yes, he knows why he's there, but he's always questioning it. And so he's got a kind of detachment to everything that goes on around him. And that's quite hard as an actor, because you suddenly have to the questions that you ask yourself when you're going into a scene about, what do I want? Why am I here? Balthazar often doesn't have an answer to those questions. And Jaden, I remember thinking, really struggling with some scenes, because he couldn't get under the surface of what the character wanted. And that's really complex, far harder than it sounds. So I really rated him for capturing that. He kind of just floats above everyone else. Oscar, our director, often says that he thinks that class is the most interesting topic to talk about in America because it's everywhere and it's so ingrained in everyday life, and more it's becoming this kind of fight. I think some people will, find that as sort of a tough pill to swallow, especially with that ending and what it kind of says about saviorism, says about class politics, says about the rich and the poor. Yeah, it kind of just says it for what it is. And I hope it's a conversation point. I hope people will talk about it. I hope people will talk about it in reference to what's going on in the world right now. When I'd read the script and I'd signed on, this was probably about 6 months before we started shooting, and we were talking about references specifically for Solomon, whether that was historical school shooters or for sort of notable people within these online communities, within the manosphere, and the sort of content they consume and the sort of Discord servers they're in and the language they use and the sort of things that might be up on their bedroom wall and the way that they sort of look at the world, I suppose, was kind of a crazy world to step into. I think for Solomon, it was, I think more than anything, the trying to figure out who he was, who he is, where he belongs. And that's caused, and he spent time in all of these quite wildly different communities. As you said, there's a pride flag, he's got a swastika. It's quite extreme, but you see how confused he is. And he's in the film, he says, I've had a lot of phases, which is sort of mad and hilarious that's what he takes out of this. That's what he's taken out of these moments in his life. I think there are absolutely people out there. There are Balthazars out there, and there are Solomons out there. And I think this movie's just, it's platformed an extreme case. I'd like to think that, most people, even if they are extremely wealthy and disconnected and kind of have this savior complex, they could at least learn from an experience like Balthazar had.